Going all right?
Yeah. Is there anybody outside who wants to testify? They can come in. Do they know they can come in? They're going to.
We have a committee assistant who manages all.
All right.
Okay, so we are live. Good morning. Today is Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. We're continuing our testimony on Bill S 258 and Fish and Wildlife. We are doing 2 days of, we're in essence doing a hearing spread over 2 days. Unfortunately, we don't have the large committee rooms available to us that are certainly more comfortable for folks. They are they're not available this year because of some COVID related HVAC considerations in the State House. So we are gonna be we're gonna be inviting people up to speak to the committee. I'll ask people to introduce themselves and just where your name and where you're from. If you're officially representing any particular organization, you could let us know that as well, please. We've also asked people in general as they've signed up, are you here to support the bill or oppose the bill? We're trying to make sure that we keep things pretty even Steven, and but every opinion is entirely welcome. For the people who aren't going to have the chance, they may have work obligations, etc. I'll understand that. You can Zoom in and testify remotely, or you can also submit written testimony to the committee that will be shared with every committee member and posted on our committee website so that the committee and the public at large all have the same information. So it's an open process. We've gotten off to a good start. I know that there are passions around this issue going every which way, and we've had an excellent discussion so far. I'm anticipating it will continue the same way. The underlying concept in the bill, I think, honestly, is research, and that is that we all live together, have different opinions, and we need to find ways to bring people together and bring some tolerance to the discussion. So I'll ask people to do their best to stick to the issues. And I think if there's one thing I've ever seen that takes us off track is when we start talking about people rather than policies that we're looking at. So I know you know all that, but I wanted to repeat it. So with that, we will be calling people. Oh, sorry, Senator White, you had an excellent suggestion. Let's have the committee introduce ourselves to the room and the folks online.
I'm happy to start. Hi, I'm Senator Rebecca White, and I serve the Windsor County District, which also includes the town of Thetford.
I'm Mark McDonald. I represent Orange County,
You said not Thetford.
except for the four. The towns in the four corners of Orange County. All nibbled away at, but others to make 15.
My name is Chris Gray. I represent the Addison Senate District.
My name is Ann Watson, and I represent the Washington District.
I'm Dick McCormick, and I represent the Windsor with Senator Mike.
Great. So we're scheduling 4 minutes for people to speak, which is not a long time, but you can get a lot covered in 4 minutes. And if you go long, we'll ask, I'll politely ask you to wrap up and we'll move on. And the whole point is to make sure that everyone has equal time. If you go too long, then someone doesn't get the opportunity to provide testimony. So with that, we'll start with our first guest, and that is Eric Morton. Is Eric in the room?
There's an Eric's iPhone.
Where's that?
I see it on the left corner.
Okay, so Eric on the screen, is that Eric Morton?
You guys hear me okay?
It's a little hard to hear you. We're gonna turn up our end. Maybe if you can lean in.
Okay.
That's better.
Great.
How now?
Okay, sounds good. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, good morning. My name is Eric Morton. I reside in Berrytown. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. First off, I'd just like to note that I'm testifying on S-258 as introduced and not draft 1.2, which was proposed yesterday. I can only
Eric,
assume that this committee will be taking future testimony on the new draft once people have had time to review it. I strongly oppose S-258. This bill is a total waste of taxpayer time and resources. The current structure of the Fish and Wildlife Board has passed the test of time, and it's a system that works, as evidenced by the abundance of wildlife for the enjoyment of all. Any change to the current structure of the board will shift decision-making from science-based to emotionally fueled. During testimony on Tuesday, Ms. Caldenzi from Protect Our Wildlife stated, and I quote, S-258 allows for diverse voices at the table to share concerns, ideas, and recommendations to department staff, end quote. Under the current structure, all meetings held by the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Board are open to the public. Public comments, sharing of concerns, ideas, and recommendations are not only welcome, but encouraged. What Ms. Caldenzi should have said is that currently her group cannot easily push their anti-hunting agenda onto the Fish and Wildlife Department, which they find unacceptable. Supporters of S-258 are seeking to push an anti-hunting agenda that is solely based on emotion and not backed by any real science. Please leave the decisions regarding how we enjoy the outdoors and the wildlife to the people and the system that has a proven history of success. Historic new regulations regarding hunting coyotes with hounds were recently enacted by the Fish and Wildlife Board because of earlier legislation from the same committee. Senator Bray clearly had no intention of giving the new regulations a chance when you were drafting new legislation to ban before rulemaking was even completed. Give it time to see if the new regulations work. These regulations took considerable time, effort, and money to draft and put into effect. Stop wasting our money needlessly. We as Vermont hunters, anglers, and trappers are tired of being attacked every time you're in session. We're watching where you stand on these issues very closely. Please do not jeopardize our heritage and our way of life. I respectfully request that you oppose S-258. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Why we ask him to send us his written version? I think he's reading.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you could hear that request. If you could email in your testimony, it was a little hard to hear. And I think in general, if you, for anyone in the room or online, if you can email in your testimony, it's great to be able to read it again after. Sometimes people quote facts and figures pretty quickly, and it's hard to keep up a little bit. So if you can email our committee assistant, we'll have a copy for everyone, and it'll be on our website. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Eric. Is it, I don't know if it's News or Noise?
It is news.
News.
Yep.
Morning.
I usually tell my posers news, you know.
Well, that's
They look at it on TV, but-
pretty graphic now, I'm gonna remember. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, senators, for allowing me to testify. My name is Eric News. I live in Johnson, Vermont, in Loyal County. My background is I have a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Management. And I was the first game warden hired in the state of Vermont in '71 that had that kind of background. Much to the worry of the other game wardens, because at that time we were in the deer wars. I think some of you with a little more gray hair may remember, back then, we had no doe hunting. And we were faced with an overpopulation of deer. And unfortunately, it was the year also when the legislature had control of the deer herd. That was not under the purview of the Fish and Wildlife Board. It was considered too political, too important to relegate to Fish and Wildlife Board and the Fish and Wildlife biologists, much to Ben Day's chagrin, who was the chief biologist at the time. And when I came in, we had a wicked overpopulation of deer. In my district, on the Hogback Deer Yard, we had the highest number of starved deer per square mile in the United States. Not a very good reputation for our state. And it was almost the reverse of what's going on in this legislature here. It was primarily the hunters that disagreed we should hunt deer, we should hunt does. They come through an era of scarcity, And they knew that the way you increase a deer herd is to having fawns, does. And they didn't believe the science that you could have too many deer on the landscape. And not only was it detrimental to the deer herd, but to the habitat and all kinds of things. This legislation, in my opinion, and I am opposed to it, kind of reverses that. Now we have folks that are philosophically opposed to many forms of use of wildlife, particularly killing of wildlife. And that's a fine viewpoint. A lot of hunters share parts of that also. But it can lead to the same sort of abuse on the other side. The legislature held on to control of the deer herd through the 80s. And finally, they just got totally sick of it because they were getting bombarded left and right. Deer were dying in people's dooryards. You could hardly find a buck that had more than a thin spike because they were malnourished in the winter. And they finally turned it back to Fish and Wildlife and said, here, you guys take this and take all the pressure with it. It took years to turn that around and grow our habitat back. So that we're at the point now, at least with deer, that we have a healthy herd. It's 100,000 deer less than we had at the peak in the late 60s. But they're much healthier. We have a much better buck ratio to the does, and it's better for all kinds of wildlife. So my reading of the bill, it seems to me that it comes from a good place. It's trying to accomplish a greater diversity on who has say on management of our public resource. However, in trying to do that, it appears to me that it's creating a whole nother level of bureaucracy. And that it's going to be much more difficult for the scientists and the Fish and Wildlife Department to modify policy or even create new policy. Because now they have this board that is, the title here is advisory, but the reality is they are going to have to essentially report to this board, hope to get them so they understand what the science is. And some are going to not have a very good background in wildlife management science, and to try to bring them up to speed. And if they disagree, then they're going to have to write in writing, say why they disagree. That information then, when the rulemaking from the department goes to LCAR, will be right. The LCAR folks are going to look at it, again, the legislature. If they disagree with what the department says, then it's probably going to go to the courts. So my reading is that this is essentially legislature, you folks, deciding that you want to have more control over fish and wildlife policy and rulemaking, and all that brings with it. The other thing that I would bring up, having been a game warden for 16 years in my district, knowing how the laws work, that when you have a law that does not have backing of the users, the people that are actually out in the field that need to comply with it, there's be a fair number that won't comply. The ones that do comply are going to be reluctant to turn in the ones that don't. And game wardens, I cover almost all of Loyal County. And I can assure you, even though back in the day we could work 100-hour work weeks, you're only in one place at one time. You rely on other users, landowners, good citizens to let us know when there's violations. And without that support, you're spitting into the wind on the laws that you pass. You've got to have compliance, and it's got to be voluntary. The bad actors, yeah, we arrest them and haul them to jail best we can, but it's a tough road out. So,
Thank
if
you.
anybody has any questions, I can answer. I'm probably ran out of my time.
We're a little over.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we're some are a little fast and we'll be a little long.
Okay,
This week average. Thank you very much for
great. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Sir Watson.
I'm sort of assuming that we don't really have time for questions today.
Don't.
And so if I do have questions for you, are people's email addresses available?
If they're on the agenda.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
please.
I may have some questions for you, but I will
I'd
email.
be very happy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Good luck.
Same here.
Don't forget to color.
Next up is Jeffrey Mack, and Mr. Mack is Ms. Lee.
The order is a little, I apologize if there are 2 pros and 2 opposed, because that would be my mistake. We're trying for balance, the numbers are equal at the end. I got a little confused.
Okay.
My name is Jeffrey Mack. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live in Addison County for the last 19 years and have lived in Vermont all my life. In my younger years, I was a deer hunter and also hunted for partridge. I'm not anti-hunting. What I witnessed with coyote hunting is against every rule of hunting I was born to believe. It's unbelievable the concerns that I have. Hounding is one of the most is must-haves for activities of pickup trucks, the citizens main break. They drive in circles trying to keep up with the location of the hounds on the ground. They only step out of the truck and shoot a coyote or bobcat running for its life. The town roads are a very important part of the hunt. Without a truck, the use of public roads and dogs, they would be forced to go into the landscape of the Vermont wilderness to put in some effort. With bait piles, hounds, trucks, rabbits, and distress calls, it gives a hounder all the advantage, the little chance for a coyote to survive. When I asked Robert Patterson, Addison County Board member, his view of a fair chase, his response was any legal method of chase. For that statement, it is very clear why all Vermonters need a voice at the table and why a full ban of coyote hunting is needed and animal cruelty and slaughter of coyote for sport. And I took a paragraph out of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife website, which said, don't allow dogs to chase wildlife, as additional stress can be very difficult for many and women. So with that statement there, seeing that releasing hounds unattended through the Vermont landscape, when you have no idea what they're chasing or what they're doing, because you can't see them, if you can't have eye contact with a dog, there is absolutely no control about. Thank you for that.
Mr. Mack, I apologize, I have to step out. You said it is leaving?
Yeah. Good morning, I'm Barbara Liddy, I live in this morning. I am in support of S-258, and I want to answer some of the questions that were raised in open testimony that I heard. Why change the Fish and Wildlife Board? Why change what's working? I think that it's easy for some to say the system is working when they are the ones that have the authority to set the rules, or if their views are represented by those who do. But for many of us, the current system does not represent us, or in my opinion, provide a way to have meaningful input. So the change is necessary because communication between the hunting and trapping community and wildlife advocates in Vermont is not working. And I'm certainly not telling anybody they don't know. We all know the level of discourse in our country has deteriorated, exacerbated by politicians and media personalities, social media that make name calling and insults acceptable conduct. And we all agree that we need to do better. A common means of talking, and I've used this in quotes, is to one another is through editorials and social media posts, and guilty is charged on that. Someone writes an opinion letter or post, someone else responds, and ping pongs back and forth, and then it dies out until the next letter or the post comes out. Another means of talking is through public comment. Fish and Wildlife Board meetings do have a comment period. The department does take public comment. And there were working groups for the BNP and coyote rule. But when wildlife advocates do not see their comments and their participation reflected in meaningful actions, it feels like it's token and meaningless consultation. And that's what I feel is one of the problems with the public comment and public participation process. So to my mind, one of the most important changes of S-258 is that it makes the Fish and Wildlife Board that it will provide an opportunity for regular communication among people of different backgrounds and experiences and all who have equal authority to participate and advise on wildlife issues. And I say this based on decades of experience where I have worked with multi-stakeholder committees, the groups. I have seen individuals with vastly different backgrounds work effectively together, solve problems together, and as a result of participating together, come to develop respect and trust in each other. The challenges facing Vermont's wildlife are significant and they're changing. Chronic wasting disease, pesticide poisoning, rodenticides, habitat changes from development and changing climate, and those are just a few. There are and will be differences of opinion and difficult discussions about how to best address these challenges. But in the words of a mediator friend of mine, there are ways to disagree better. The revised Fish and Wildlife Board restructures the system, and it provides a very important means to have these discussions that does not currently exist. It will help us manage the challenges facing wildlife in the years ahead to achieve the common goal, which is the health of Vermont's wildlife. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next up is Emily Gagne. There you are on the screen. Good morning. Right here.
Hi.
Oh, but
Hi.
And
Sorry,
we-
bear with me. I have a 7-month-old with me.
It's always it's good to have a pal.
So good morning, and you can hear me all right? Everybody can hear me okay? Okay.
Great.
Good morning. My name is Emily Gagner. I'm a resident of Wolcott, Vermont. I'm not a hunter. I do not hold a hunting or fishing license. However, I fully support hunting, trapping, fishing, and Vermont wildlife. I have witnessed the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Board and biologists working together to maintain wildlife for hunters and wildlife advocates alike. With that, I want to respectfully express that I do not support the bill S-258. Furthermore, I need clarification on why we want to change the Fish and Wildlife Board when it seems like a well-oiled machine and needs no transformation from what it already is. Additionally, they as a board and organization have gone through much hard work to make the recent rules and regulations for a more modernized coyote season in Vermont and try to make a balance for both hunters and non-hunters alike. Don't we want to see the outcome of these new rules and regulations over a more extended period of time? Not just for the newest season that these rules have been out for. Please, from me, a supporter of all hunters, non-hunters, animal advocates, and wildlife involved, reconsider this bill. A new Fish and Wildlife Board is not needed, as the one in place has done a fantastic job for all of the wildlife of Vermont. Thank you for your time and listening to my testimony.
Okay. Thank you very much. With that, our next guest is Karima Vorney. Carrie, and you are online. Good morning.
Morning. Is my sound okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
All right, here I go. So I'm a resident of the Whiting Shoreham area in Addison County. Before the moratorium, I was negatively impacted by coyote hounders for several winters in a row. I'm testifying in favor of Bill S-258, in particular, the provision to ban coyote hounding. My fundamental reasoning for this is that I believe it is impossible to effectively regulate this activity to not negatively impact landowners, families, and their animals. In particular, I would like to argue against the idea that GPS shot collars constitute control over roaming packs of hunting dogs. And again, this is just based on my personal experience, in which hounds cover miles of terrain with great speed, following the scents of animals that weave in and out of property lines constantly. Hounders are separated from their hounds by a great distance, oftentimes miles. And even in proximity, I've witnessed hounders unable to recall their dogs. And one incident where a hounder had to chase two of their dogs across a field while trespassing before catching them, it took hours. I have also seen hounds run across and into roads. They make an awful braying racket that you can hear from miles away for hours on end, and they disturb and displace other local wildlife. If there's any point I would want people to take away from my testimony today, it's this. The hounds that ended up at my house, so literally in my yard, at my barn, a few feet from my door, numerous weeks in a row on the weekends over several winters, scaring my children, alarming my dog, spooking my livestock. Every single one of those hounds had a GPS shot collar on, and my land was posted. So I'm just asserting that fact. And I would like people to just put yourself in my shoes. I'm out on a walk with I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, my dog who's on a leash, and a hound or a pack of hounds arrives. Their handlers never informed me they were coming. They never asked my permission. They are oftentimes parked miles away, sitting in their trucks while they let their dogs run all over the area. They would have no idea that their dogs have come upon other humans or their animals because the GPS collars do not give them any of that information. I have no way of reaching the handlers to inform them of an encounter or to get them to call off their dogs. I'm literally at the mercy of these hounds, unable to defend myself, my dog, or my children. When I raised the scenario with the game warden, he told me I should always carry mace on my own property. So I just have a minute here to ask, they used to come, it was like a Saturday morning and it was always around 10 a.m. I'm a working mother. I work all week to pay taxes on this property that I own. It's about 37 acres. And I had to sort of stay inside or calculate what is the risk to take a walk on a Saturday morning. Name one person who likes the feeling of being approached by an unknown dog, let alone a pack of them, where there is nowhere to be found and nowhere to be seen. And I'm an avid dog lover, but I'm just not fond of that kind of an experience. I would feel awful if my children witnessed a dog fight. And then I asked myself why I'm being put in this position and why the interests of a few individuals pursuing what I assume is a sport or a hobby takes priority over, dozens of residents in my area who are minding their own business. All my neighbors hunt, like literally everyone around me. I have agreements with neighbors who hunt turkey on my property, neighbors who ride their horses on my property. I just want to assert that none of these people are my neighbors. And so I believe that this activity is sort of setting up inevitable confrontations between people, and it puts landowners on edge and on the defensive. And I'm not sure exactly what it serves, and I'm still sort of waiting for that answer. I really do think that we should prioritize the rights of people who are stewards of the land, who want to authorize ethical activity, not reckless endangerment. And I don't understand the point in creating regulations that by their very nature cannot be followed. This is my conclusion. Coyote hounding should be banned because it is an activity that cannot be effectively regulated, maybe in theory, but in reality, it will all fall apart, and it already has. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Forney. Next up is Trevor Bummel. And I don't know if Trevor is not in the room, and I don't see him online. Thank you, Senator White.
Oh, nice. Trevor Bummel.
Yeah, she's leaving.
All right, so I think let's go on to Ms. Bourbeau. And if Trevor is located or logs in, we'll bring him back into the conversation later. So, good morning, Ms. Bourbeau.
Good morning, Senator Bray, members of the Senate Natural Resources Committee. My name is Joanne Bourbeau, I'm the Northeastern Regional Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I've been a resident of Vermont since 1995. On behalf of the HSUS and our more than 6,300 members and supporters in the state, I'm here in support of S258. You do have a copy of my written testimony that I submitted in January, so I'll keep my oral testimony brief. I echo the frustration that you've heard from other Vermonters about having no voice at the table when it comes to wildlife management decisions. I represented the Humane Society as a member of the working groups to draft rules on both trapping and on the hounding of coyote. The commissioner said during his testimony to this committee, hearing every voice doesn't mean we do everything they say. I can attest to the fact that they did absolutely nothing that we said during the working group discussions, ignoring every recommendation that we made in the final rule proposal. The only way we can truly have a voice at the table is to have a seat at the table. Currently, although the board is responsible for setting policy on wildlife management, there's no requirement for members to even have a fundamental knowledge in areas such as wildlife biology, biodiversity, ecosystems, and conservation science. This bill would change that with a training mandate that would put all members on an equal footing and knowledge base. Historically, members of the board who are hunters or trappers have been responsible for creating policy that governs their own activities and have lacked diversity in multiple areas, failing to adequately represent the whole range of interests and values held by Vermont residents. In 2023, less than 10% of Vermont residents held a paid hunting license. And despite the overall population increasing, the number of paid license holders has decreased by an astonishing 55% in the last 50 years. Yet every current member of the board either hunts, fishes, and/or traps. The wildlife of Vermont is held in the public trust to be managed for the benefit of all residents, not just the small percentage who seek to kill them. S-258 would also prohibit the cruel and unnecessary activity of coyote hounding and shooting coyotes over bait. Hounding is considered unsporting even among many hunters because it gives unfair advantage to the hunter. Equally troubling is the practice of baiting, which offers hunters even more of an unfair advantage. In fact, members of the coyote hounding working group agreed to prohibit the baiting of coyotes for training purposes, but with no explanation, Vermont Fish and Wildlife ultimately removed that provision from its final proposal. We respectfully urge you to pass 258 to align the membership of our Fish and Wildlife Board more accurately with Vermont's residents and values, and to spare coyotes the cruelty associated with hounding and baiting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Borbeau. And next up is, well, let me just double check if Trevor Martin has shown up online. No. So we'll go on then to Bruce Martin.
It was Trevor Bonnell.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And he had sent an email, he was unable to be here today. It did not get sent to Jude though.
Okay, so.
So if you cannot make it, maybe you should send Jude a note. Yeah.
Right, if again, the committee, any emails to the committee get shared with everyone and posted on our website. So if you can't make it, please do write the committee and share your thoughts. So then we got Bruce Martin is up next, please. Is Bruce here? Yes. We'll try and see if he's right outside the door.
Doesn't appear to be here.
Mr. Martin, here's the person on the screen. We'll come back to him. Next up is Mr. Coronado.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
My name is Ron Coronado for the town board. I'm also the director of Vermont Wildlife Patrol and I'm also a member of the Osprey Nation. I've sent in electronic testimony as it relates to coyote hunting, hounds and baiting. A lot to cover in this bill, so in the interest of time, I only want to read my written testimony that I've also submitted as it relates to board reform. For over a year, I've regularly attended board meetings to speak on a variety of topics, which I've included links to with this testimony electronically. Much of my testimony is related to my support for the restoration of extirpated species. So when I heard the commissioner and others testifying to the abundance and flourishing of Vermont's wildlife, I think of the American marten, Canada lynx, eastern cougar, gray wolf, elk, and caribou that until recently roamed the Green Mountains. These species are not flourishing or abundant. At a recent board meeting, I listened to the department's moose and bear biologist Nick Fortin speak of our need to manage our deer herd, and that, quote, we needed another lever to pull to bring net numbers within management goals because the department is simply not selling enough hunting licenses to meet those goals. Where is the consideration for native predators, like the wolf and cougar, who must help maintain the ecological balance of the state? We need a board that recognizes the role native predators fulfill in helping maintain a healthy deer population. Did you know that next week 2 board terms expire? I am watching closely to see if our governor is listening to this discussion, or whether he will simply appoint 2 more outspoken advocates of trapping and hound hunting, as he has with the most recent appointments of 2 trappers to the board in 2023. We can't only protect the parts of the ecosystem that serve humans. The mission of the board and the department is to protect all wildlife. The board's role has been to protect game animals and fur bearers, but we need a new board that recognizes the interconnectedness of all beings, especially as we increasingly address the impacts of climate change on our wildlife. Did you know that the eastern mallard population in Vermont and other New England states has declined 38% since 1998? We think the board would be restricting the bag limit for the species, but when they tried that before, it negatively impacted hunting opportunities. If it wasn't worth hunting a duck, you could only kill 2 of a day. The current proposed daily bag limit is 4, with a total possession limit of 12 mallards. I'm gonna leave you with some information that I got from last night's board meeting regarding that. I don't have electronic copies. We need a board that acts in the best interest of the species before the interests of hunters, trappers, and fisherfolk. That is the challenge and mission we face today, and why I support S258. I learned about the mallard decline at the board meeting last night and from conversations with a board member. By the way, it took me just over a year of attending board meetings before my own, before any member spoke to me at a meeting. Last night, I told the board that my own representative for Orange County has never reached out to speak to me, despite my having been his only constituent to regularly attend so many board meetings in person and to speak to important wildlife issues. During the break last night in the meeting, he finally came over to me and thanked me for calling him out on this and agreed that it was time for a discussion. It shouldn't take any Vermonter who is informed and passionate about wildlife a year before their voice is heard by their representative. We need a board that can work with a variety of constituents to recreate and enjoy being outdoors in nature, not only trappers, hunters, and fisherfolk. In closing, I'd like to say that because of my views on wildlife, I do not want to be seen as an enemy of the board or the department, but as an ally. I am guardedly optimistic and even excited at the possibility of being equally represented by my Fish and Wildlife Board. Not only as someone who enjoys trout fishing every spring from my kayak on Root Pond, or as a lover of all things wild, but possibly most importantly as an Indigenous person with my own traditional worldview. That kind of representation and recognition helps literally end centuries of misrepresentation and oppression by our dominant society. How cool is that? In all my electric testimony, I have a link to the last 9 public comments I've given at board meetings, as well as a report that I've made over my observations in the last 6 weeks since the coyote hunting season began in the field. I've been observing their practices and I have a report on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next up is Adam Merrill.
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to go ask for Bruce? No, Anna.
Adam Merrill.
Is Adam? He is the organizer from the Vermont Federation of, maybe they. Their list. So. You may ask Chris Brad.
So will Adam Merrill shows up in person or online, and we can bring Adam into the conversation. So we'll move on to Katie Nolan.
I think she's on.
And right there. Good morning.
Good morning. I lost price in order a little bit in school over here. Good morning, my name is Katie Nolan. I'm here to speak in support of S258, the Wild Animals Campaign Specialist in Defense of Animals, a nonprofit animal protection organization with over 800 members in Vermont. And I serve on the advisory board of Protect Our Wildlife Vermont. I'm also a resident of Richmond, Vermont, and have a master's in environmental law and policy from Vermont. You sent us an email, Tim. I did, so that was not an overstep. If you don't have any other questions about that email, to discuss. So while hunting, trapping, and fishing license holders bring valuable perspectives on wildlife management, it's crucial to recognize that expertise extends beyond their community. Photographers, hikers, bird watchers, scientists all possess unique insights and knowledge essential to wildlife management. I myself do not hunt, trap, or fish, but I'm an avid trail runner, so I spend hours every day out in the woods, observing wildlife. I've seen bears, coyotes, foxes, turkeys, grouse. I could go on and on. So our request has not been for a complete overhaul of the existing system. Rather, we're advocating for inclusion and asking that non-license holders be given a designated seat at the table where our voice can contribute meaningfully to policy discussions. This is precisely what 258 does, in my opinion. And while leaving the ultimate rulemaking authority in the hands of the scientists and experts in the Fish and Wildlife Department. It's imperative to acknowledge that hunting, trapping, and fishing do not happen in a vacuum. They exist within a complex ecosystem where their impacts can extend far beyond the immediate target species. Thus, it is necessary to bring in more diverse perspectives into the conversation and evaluate the broader impacts of these practices on other game species, non-game species, and their habitats. Yeah. So if I may conclude by reiterating something that a member of this committee said after testimony was given earlier this week, and this was also reiterated at the beginning of this meeting. This type of dialogue keeps me optimistic about Vermont. We can sit in a room and listen to each other. The heart of this bill is respect for other ways of thinking and living here. It is my hope that with this bill, the board will become a place that fosters meaningful dialogue in a way that prioritizes the well-being of wildlife and wild spaces for all Vermonters. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. With that, our next guest is Ben Bro.
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, it's always yay. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize for being propped up on pillows here. I'm actually recovering from back surgery, so I'm at home.
All right, well, we hope you get well soon.
Yeah.
And is your name Ben Bro? We're seeing Jake on the screen.
Yeah, his name is Ben.
Yeah, it's Ben Bro. It's my son's probably Zoom account. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So the floor is yours, please.
Okay. So my name's Ben Bro, and I'm a resident of Burlington, and I am opposed to this bill. I spend countless hours each year on my land in Essex and the woods of Cambridge and Wells, Vermont, and I can attest that the fish and game species are flourishing. My passion is deer hunting, but the sporting community is tight-knit, and we fully support each other's passion and way of life. I keep hearing from this committee that you aren't against hunting and that you support the sportswomen and sportsmen, and that this bill has no intention to impact our hunting. To that, I have to say, we do not trust you. The actions of this legislature over the past 8 to 10 years have demonstrated nothing but attacks on our heritage, way of life, and recreation. Be it firearm bills, trapping bills, coyote hunting bills, bear hounding bills, and more, they keep coming relentlessly year after year, with little or no work ever being done to strengthen our interest or show us support. Actions speak louder than words, and it is the demonstrated action of this legislature that makes it so we do not trust or believe that this bill will not lead to more negative impact on our way of life in the future. I'm also very skeptical of the intention of this bill when I examine what's happening nationally. Across the country, there's a push by well-funded groups to put non-hunting and fishing members on boards and commissions. For instance, groups like Wildlife for All, who Protect Our Wildlife Vermont happens to be a member of, are the push for this. It's the exact rhetoric that I hear using to push this bill, and the talk around this bill that's happening all around the country. To me, my opinion is this is not a homegrown Vermont movement. I'd also like you to research the State of Washington Fish and Game Commission. In particular, you can do a Google search and look up articles and podcasts by Dr. Kim Thornburn. She was a non-hunting bird watcher who was appointed to the commission at a time when there was a push to get non-hunters on that commission. Being that she was a doctor, she understood the importance of that the science needed to guide her decisions on the commission, but she is super publicly critical of putting non-sporting community members on the commission and board. She experienced other members ignoring science to pursue anti-hunting agendas. She describes the political process being abused to take over the commission with abusive appointments and directives of a non-hunting bias. So I would appreciate if the committee members would please do some research on that. When I keep hearing about the coyote hounding and how it infringes on the property ownership rights. So my land in Essex is big but quite small. It's about 21 acres, and I use it for hunting and fishing on. And I have to post it because it's not like it's hundreds of acres. So I can't just leave it open to everyone to hunt on. So it's posted. There's a vast trail that goes through it. Would anybody like to guess who I have the most trouble with trespassing on my land about? And I'll give you the answer to that. It's not the hunters, it's not trappers or fishermen. It's the hikers, the bikers, the walkers, the skiers who don't think that the posted land applies to them. I've ruined many hunts having to get down out of a tree stand to go confront people who are coming right through there. So my point is, every recreation imposes that that infringement on people's property rights, and it's not just a hounding for coyotes issue here. It's my experience is it's the non-sportsman community that I have the problem with. Also, the new part of the bill yesterday, I see the setbacks on the 50-foot setbacks on the trails, and I'm confused if that applies to public land or private land. I'm a little confused when I read it because it talks about where public has access or could reasonably be expected to recreate. And for me, I have a vast trail that goes through there. I only give permission for the snowmobilers, but could somebody reasonably come through there hiking or whatever? Yes, but I shouldn't be told on my own private land where I could place a trap. So again, thank you for letting me come testify and kind of speak from my heart here. And I would hope that you reconsider and oppose this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Bro. And next up is Nancy Fitzpatrick. I think I'm gonna, as we go on, I'm gonna pause just to read one section of the bill to remind folks about how the bill proponents turn game management back to the rulemaking to the commissioner's office directly. And it says the department may make rules for the regulation of fish and game and the taking thereof, except as otherwise specifically provided by law. The rules shall be designed to maintain the best health, population, and utilization levels of the regulated species and of other necessary or desirable species that are ecologically related to the regulated species. The rules shall be supported by the best science available to the department and peer-reviewed research. So I just want to, we've talked about this before, but I want to reassure people that the goal is management through the commissioner's office using, as I was just citing in the law, the best science available. Okay, with that, sorry, Ms. Fitzpatrick.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Fitzpatrick and I live in Barrytown. I'm here today to speak in favor of S258. I volunteer with the Center for Wild Bird Rehabilitation at VINS doing rescue and transport, and with the Vermont Center for Eco Studies with their Loon Conservation Project. Over the past 11 months, I've attended 7 Fish and Wildlife Board meetings, but one stands out as particularly unsettling. On April 26, 2023, a well-researched and respectfully submitted petition was presented by a Washington County resident after a motion activated camera caught footage of a sow with 2 cubs in tow being shot. The mother was trying to get her cubs to safety when she was killed. 2 to 3 weeks later, one of the cubs was found dead of starvation on the petitioner's property. The ask seemed pretty simple. Change the wording in the regulation pertaining to the shooting of sows with cubs from not recommended, which is what it is now, to illegal. The immediate reaction from the Director of Wildlife of the department was to reject the petition because their numbers are stable. It's all about numbers, not individuals. There was not even a hint of compassion for the suffering inflicted on these animals in the name of recreation and a good photo op. The petition was tabled pending further information from the department, but was subsequently rejected at the October board meeting. It was unanimously rejected. The commissioner testified that he made a promise to all Vermonters that their voices would be heard, and this was done by holding public comment hearings on the new fur bearer rule. Wildlife advocacy groups were well represented at the hearing I attended in Montpelier on June 21st. Breakout groups brought consumptive and non-consumptive people together with 2 department employees per group. We were each given a sheet of questions to answer, followed by discussion. But like the working groups which protect our wildlife, Vermont Wildlife Coalition, Vermont Coyote Coexistence Coalition, and the Humane Society of the United States were all part of, this was another disappointing example of the department's unwillingness to recognize the voices of those who are concerned for the well-being of wildlife in our state. The commissioner's promise was lip service, nothing more. The commissioners claim that the passage of S-258 will result in more work for the department and will necessitate the hire of additional employees has not been substantiated. We heard him praise his department staff more than once. What is the objection to shifting rulemaking authority to the trained professionals? The board's arrogance with respect to LCAR's objections is the reason S-258 has been introduced, and it underlines the need for change. A diversified board will benefit Vermont's people and wildlife by upholding professional, ethical, equitable, and moral standards. Thank you.
Next up is Ray Gonda, who has been on the screen. Mr. Gonda, it's your turn. Good morning.
Thank you. I am Ray Gonda. I am from South Burlington. I want to thank you for this opportunity to testify. I've been up all night revising my testimony to get it down to 2 minutes, so I had to eliminate a lot of it. Credentials. I don't have a degree in biology or animal biology or zoology or anything like that, but I have a lot of experience. I still hunt. I hunt deer and small game. I trapped during and before high school. That's 60 years ago, 70 years ago almost. And I fish. Now, I don't want to cite my credentials because they're written in the email that I sent to you. And it's 2 pages long. So please take a gander at it. I would appreciate that. I oppose this bill, particularly messing with the Fish and Wildlife Board. I think there are some other ways that the Fish and Wildlife Board itself could be regulated by the legislature in very minor ways that would help a little bit. I'm not ready to discuss those now because it's really inchoate at this point. So I will read my testimony now. My big concern is this. I don't know if those of you who are roughly my age or somewhat younger might remember Frank Bryan in his book about politics. Okay, so he talked about democracy and having government as close to people as is possible. So here's what I see with this bill about the Fish and Wildlife Board. A fundamental argument used by some of the bill proponents, committee members, is when moving from citizen decision makers to bureaucratic decision makers, it improves the democratic process. I believe this is a false assumption. we have an existing example of this rearrangement, and it has allowed political pressure from above to reign. Currently, while it is true that the governor appoints all of the Fish and Wildlife members, once they are appointed, they are independent and not subject to pressure by a governor. And successive governors from different political parties continue to appoint members. So the board will likely remain neutral with respect to partisan or personal influence over time and truly represent the public. I do not believe this is so necessarily with the Fish and Wildlife Board. It is part of the administration, so the administration can have a direct political impact by any sitting governor if they work at it. Now, I mentioned in my opening statement, I think, that I had an example of what I'm talking about, and I will cite that now. The former Water Resources Board, an analog of the current Fish and Wildlife Board, was independent of the governor, but some decade or more ago became advisory, just as S-258 proposes, with rulemaking moved to within the Agency of Natural Resources, using the same arguments we hear now. However, the ANR is clearly stumbling in making decisions under the use of public waters rules created by the former Water Resources Board. And I think there may be a couple of you on this committee that heard my testimony at Elkhart during that time. That was just a few weeks ago. Okay, how so? It has been made clear to the many lakes and ponds associations around the state that our current governor has a heavy hand on the wheel with regard to decision-making, legalizing waters for wake boats. The issue itself is how close to shore these wake boats can operate. If the ANR had a tentative agreement, the ANR did have a tentative agreement with the lake associations of proposing 1,000 feet from shore, based on fairly good science. The science varied, but it was good. But when that proposal went up the chain of command to the governor's administration, it came back at 500 feet. Under pressure, lake associations muted their demands and now support 500 feet. What are 4 and 5 foot wakes at 500 feet from shore? They become 2 and 2.5 foot waves in the no wake zone or the shoreline safety zone. So it basically makes a mockery of that safety zone.
Mr. Ganda, we're running long. If you could.
Okay, I can cut it short. Both the former Water Resource Board and the current Fish and Wildlife Board brought government closer to citizens, the essence of democracy. So if you move these functions of the Fish and Wildlife Board into the Agency of Natural Resources, I think it very strongly diminishes democracy here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Alana Stevenson. Good morning.
Good morning. There's a lot I could say, but obviously based on time, I focused on control accounts and control of dogs. I'm Alana Stevenson in Charlotte. I have over 20 years professional experience working with dogs, resolving behavioral issues, specializing in aggression. I've had some personal experiences with the Fish and Wildlife Department and Board, all negative, with the exception of some lovely game wardens. I'm happy to discuss them with anyone one-on-one. The commissioner said their recommended hounding regulations weren't given enough time to be proven effective. I didn't see any legitimate or reasonable recommendations made by either the department or board regarding coyote hounding. Regarding training systems, remote collars are already used. These collars did not prevent multiple attacks on people and companion animals. I know two of the people who were attacked. Meryl with her Portuguese water dog in Ripton in 2019. She was attacked for 45 minutes with severe injuries for everyone, including her partner. And Lori Demuth, who's a veterinarian in Fairleigh. And she was attacked as well, running 2 miles with her dog, mountain biking, and she was also helpless. It took a long time, I'm straying from my testimony, but it took a long time for me to actually track her down because it was blotted out, her name was blotted out, there was no reporting on it. And when there would be any inquiry, it was, oh, it must not be a big deal. It wasn't a big deal, she was traumatized. I also submitted a list with a Elkhart breed that looked like bears and the breeds that look like coyotes, and that there are many dogs who look like both, and professionals in the field working with animals can only determine breed composition by looking at a dog with less than 50% accuracy. So it's not expected that hounds are going to be any better. And the Portuguese water dog was Meryl's, who was thought to be a bear. And Lori Demuth's dog was a Truman Shepherd, which is on the list of which I mentioned look like coyotes. So those are purebred, that doesn't include all the mixed breed dogs. So there are a lot of people walking their dogs, and it's not expected that hounds or a kennel at the time are going to know how to differentiate between a brown fluffy dog and a bear cub. To go back to the training, just because a collar is labeled a training collar doesn't mean it trains the dog. There is nothing magical with any remote training system. In order to use a remote collar to instruct a dog, the handler must know what the dog is doing and be in sight of the dog. Only one dog can be controlled at a time with a remote collar, regardless of how many dogs the system accommodates. So this makes remote systems to control hounds unreliable because we're talking groups of dogs, multiple dogs, a pack of dogs with a pack mentality, large dogs on predatory chase with high predatory aggression, off leash, uncontrolled, with somebody with a remote transmitter trying to control them from far without knowing what they're doing. That is impossible, regardless of how brilliant that person may be in animal behavior. A GPS tracks approximate location. It is not a training system. Just like a GPS doesn't teach you how to drive or control the movement of a car, it doesn't control a dog or teach you how to train one. Obviously, dogs are living and sentient creatures, far more complex than cars. A GPS may be helpful in locating or tracking dogs, but it does nothing to control them. So it'd be nice to put that to rest once and for all, but that keeps being proposed and promoted by the department. I'm happy to explain control from a behavioral perspective, but as yet I haven't heard anyone from the department or board, nor any of their lobbyists provide any definition of control or what control means to them. Mr. Bradley used the efficacy of shock in relation to invisible fencing as an argument to use shock on hounds. It's interesting he used that example. Not only is the training for invisible fencing entirely different than using shock for teaching dogs to recall, it routinely fails when it comes to predatory aggression, which any reputable trainer and behaviorist will affirm. Dogs regularly run through shock after squirrels, deer, and other animals. Invisible fencing is a containment system marking a well-defined boundary, if done properly, with flags that are visual for a dog not to cross. The parameters for training a dog to invisible fencing are in direct conflict to the goals of hounding. So whether or not shock from invisible fencing is effective or not is irrelevant. I hear hounders, board members, and trappers complain they are being picked on. when faced with any restriction or regulation. But the department and board have no problem applying restrictions to everyone else, especially non-hunters and wildlife rehabbers, who have to go through a whole smorgasbord of testing and licenses, and they're monitored for any violation. But the moment there's any little restriction or regulation on the board, everyone's all upset and crying that, we're playing foul. I have yet to see any real empathy, apologies, or accountability from the commissioner, board, or any hounders or trappers for those who've been attacked and injured by hounds, or for those whose animals have been injured or killed by traps. All I hear is the continued narrative they're being picked on. And to me, that already says a lot. There's no valid or legitimate reason, scientifically, conservation oriented, minded, whatsoever, to release and sit a pack of dogs on an animal. Thank you.
Next up is David Blatchy.
Did you?
Give a holler in the hall. Oh.
You checked? Yeah, there's only, I know, something.
Again, it's for Mr. Blatchy, if anyone knows Mr. Blatchy, maybe you could ask him to submit written testimony, which be a substitute for us person. Then we'll move on to Mr. Mullen. Good morning.
Is it still morning?
Yeah, that's 2 hours left. Still, it's looking, oh, I'm gonna, no.
That's stopped. I will be submitting this electronically later, but for the moment, good morning and thank you, Senator Bray and members of the committee. I'm Rod Mullen in West Bolton. I run my neighbor. And I'm the chair of the Vermont Wildlife Alliance. That's the plan. The big wildlife controversy shortly after I started deer hunting in the 1960s was over doe permits. My grandfather Proctor was disgusted with the Fish and Game Department, game back then, the biologist, sullying the time-honored tradition of pursuing the mighty stag. My father taught high school biology in Jericho and Burlington, and worked to convince grandfather that the overpopulated deer herd at the time could only be brought closer to the carrying capacity of our environment by killing does. On a statewide basis, the department did the same with the wider hunting community, continued the program, and the deer herd is at a healthier population level now. With my UVM biology degree, I moved away from work, but I returned almost 20 years later in time for another wildlife controversy. Around 1996, the department proposed rules against the wanton waste of wildlife. Who could object to that? Well, sportsmen's organizations did, loudly. And the department's proposal was torpedoed by something called the Fish and Wildlife Board. It was the first time that I ever heard of it. And I'm surprised to learn that this board was composed entirely of sportsmen, making their own rules for the utilization of wildlife, a public trust, not the trained professionals in the department, nor the legislature, which has the constitutional duty to do so. It would be one thing for a representative group of citizens with a focused interest in wildlife to advise the department. I agree that's a good thing, but this is not good governance. Conflict of interest and a focus on one special interest group instead of the people of Vermont is baked in. I'll jump back to the statute establishing the board does expand the board's responsibility to the conservation of fish and wildlife plants and their habitats for the people of Vermont, and to protect the integrity, vitality, and diversity of all natural systems. It's not just hunting and fishing and rules. Moving back in, that has been the baked in nature of that has been evidenced in the last few years several times, and was on full display in the new and improved fur bearer rule mandated by Act 159 that led to the head-on collision between the board and the legislature in Elkhart, when the legislature tried to exercise its constitutional duty. The department drafted this flawed rule, but one must wonder how much less work would have taken the department and how much better the rule might have been if the pros in the department didn't have to tailor it to pass muster with the board, and then spend time fruitlessly in this case, trying to convince the board to at least compromise with the General Assembly. As it was when the department even suggested that the board cede two of Elkhart's 4 objections, the board refused. voting to enact the entire rule despite its failure to follow the law. In doing so, the board has thumbed its nose at the General Assembly and by extension, many, if not most, Vermonters. This is an unnecessary mess created by a special interest group that has a disproportionate influence on wildlife policy. This latest and most obvious display of intransigence is a clear sign of the need to update our wildlife governance. The expertise of hunters, trappers, and anglers is obviously valuable in crafting hunting, trapping, and fishing rules. However, their input should be in an advisory capacity only, and the board's membership should more inclusively represent the people of Vermont that the board is supposed to serve. On a more general point in closing, many of these discussions, such as in this committee room on other issues that we've been involved in over the years on Fish and Wildlife Department website, even the websites of wildlife advocacy groups, the value of wildlife is typically summarized within the context of how we use it. And how we use them and not how we need them. Consumptive use, sport, and wildlife watching are usually what's listed. It is as though we only value wildlife to kill it and sometimes eat it or watch it. To help dispel that simplistic concept, I want to recommend UVM researcher Joe Roman's book. You're going to love this, Eat, Poop, Die, in which he explains the essential environmental services that wildlife provides, which keeps our entire world livable. Valuing wildlife for its flavor, aesthetics, and entertainment values is absurdly missing the big picture.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Thank you. Okay, so that's the catchiest title I've heard in a while.
And sold the book to me, I'll tell you.
With that, we'll go on to Mr. David Senecal. Is Mr. Senecal here? Or online?
You want me to, I can also move.
Okay, so we just pause for a moment while we give a shout out to the hallway to see. Otherwise, we'll move on and invite Mr. Senecal to rejoin later.
I messaged Mr. Bradley just to see if by chance from the Federation. He was, let's see if there's. So I messaged him to see if he's in contact, but. Yeah, not out there. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. So again, if anyone knows Mr. Senecal, if you might share with him that we'd be happy to hear from him, and if he submitted testimony by email, we'll make sure on the website as well as distributed to every committee member. With that, let's move on to Devin Brennan. Good morning, Mr. Brennan.
Good morning.
Thanks at the table. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Devin Brennan. I'm a student at Vermont Law Graduate School. I'm a candidate for a Juris Doctorate concentration in animal law, the Master of Animal Protection Policy. My partner and I live in South Boylston. I'm thankful to speak in my own behalf in support of S258. I have three main reasons for supporting S258. First, the bill normalizes the Fish and Wildlife Board. Second, the bill improves oversight over rulemaking. And third, the bill helps to recognize Vermont's public trust duties. In short, normalizing the board, improving oversight over rulemaking, and helping to recognize Vermont's public trust duties are the reasons that motivate me to support this bill. S258 amends the authority of the Fish and Wildlife Board and makes the board's capacity like that of almost all other state administrative agencies advisory only. Vermont laws tend to presume boards are only advisory. The current statutory scheme constituting the board, however, seems to discourage efficient rulemaking. Making the board's capacity advisory only, like Vermont statutes tend to presume for agencies boards, will likely encourage efficient rulemaking. S258 allows a qualified, informed board to advise on rules the Fish and Wildlife Department proposes. Under this bill, the board advises the department on whether the department's proposed rules satisfy certain statutory requirements. As currently constituted, however, the governor's appointees to the board need neither satisfy any specific statutory requirements nor receive any training on matters affecting fish and wildlife. And the board itself must promulgate rules satisfying those statutory requirements. This bill sets a standard for appointees to the board, educates members appointed to the board, and consequently improves oversight for rulemaking. S-258 helps to recognize Vermont's duties to hold the fish and wildlife of the state in trust for the benefit of the citizens of the state. Such duties are part of Vermont's public trust duties. Vermont's public trust duties require the state regulate in recognition of that trust. More efficient, informed rulemaking under this bill helps recognize the public trust duties which the state must fulfill with a constant and continual vigilance. These three reasons mainly motivate my support of S-258. This bill is larger than any one issue affecting fish and wildlife. Because this bill normalizes the board, improves oversight over rulemaking, and helps to recognize Vermont's public trust duties, I encourage the committee to advance this bill. Thank you for your time and attention.
Don't leave South Burlington when you graduate.
I won't.
Live in Mr.
I have plans to stay.
Good.
Thank you.
I like that. Next up is Fritz Schroeder. Mr. Schroeder, good morning.
Thank you. Hey, my name is Fred Schroeder. I live in Bristol. And I grew up in South Burlington. Did you grow up in South Burlington?
No.
Or South Burlington?
Well, we're Windsor County, so South Burlington is in our district, so we get very excited when our.
I like,
So-
sorry.
You know I'm a
So-
Chittenden County person.
I'm here, well, first of all, let me explain a little more about myself. I have a degree in wildlife biology from the University of Vermont. I've spent a good portion of my career working in fisheries and wildlife resources. I'm in opposition to 258, and I'll tell you, I feel it's a two-part bill, and I don't feel it should be a two-part bill. Obviously, there's issues with coyote hounding in the state. And obviously, there's issues with the Fish and Wildlife Board in the state. But to combine them together, I feel that the hounding issue, the results of not getting what people wanted done with hounding, the opposition to hounding. The result with that was, let's change the board, okay? And I feel that it should be a two-part thing. Not a one, full meal deal, as we would say. So I think it should go back to the drawing board there. And I really enjoyed listening to the opposition here. I think we have more in common than you think. I am a hunter, I'm a fisherman, I do not trap, I'm certified to trap. I would trap if I want to, I'm just too busy with my current life, my family. Maybe someday I will pick up trapping. So I really enjoy being in nature. I love hearing the songbirds. I respect all wildlife. But my biggest fear with this bill is that non-hunters, anti-hunters will become board members. And I understand we need to have diversity on the board. But my fear is that anti-hunting, anti-trapping, and anti-fishing, well, they're out there too, will become members of this board. And that, I don't believe, is the right thing. Is there a way that can, in this board, in this rule or ruling, can antis not be on the board? I don't know, but what would be the point? No, I'm talking here, not you.
All right, let's one at a time. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Schroeder.
Okay, so my biggest fear is that fish and wildlife laws will be changed ultimately over time. First and I'm not gonna talk about coyote hounding. But what's next? Is it chasing raccoons with coyotes? Because I know people that coon hound. Okay, what's next? Bear hound, okay? there's a lot of things that can be changed over time, very slowly. Right? You pull the wool over our eyes, we don't even see it. Okay, eventually things have changed. Eventually, we can't control our deer population. We're having a hard enough time as it is right now. We don't have enough hunters. It's not because of lack of interest. It's because people are aging out. Okay, the great generation is dying off. The people that hunted and fished a lot have died out. Now we're struggling to keep our numbers up to control deer populations. So, in short, I just want to say that I don't feel it should be a two-part bill. It should be separated. And I don't feel that non-consumptive people should be on this board. People that are consumptive are people that actually kill animals for food. Okay. And they should be the ones on this board. The non-consumptive people cannot fully understand what it is to take a life of life. So that's what I want to say. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure. We're a little ahead, so I'll just offer a comment back on the bill, not a comment, that's an explanation. So the board, then as an advisory board, is asked to advise on game, non-game, and habitat. So I think that's why we're envisioning more voices, because it's not only advice to the commission on game species. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it's not so easy to see when you're reading all the sort of legalese. So thank you for coming in.
And we changed it from consumptive, non-consumptive to licensed, non-licensed.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. Next up is Courtney Ferenc.
She's on.
Or Ferenc.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm a native Vermonter living in Dorset, Vermont with my husband, 2 sons, and hound dogs, and I adamantly oppose Bill S-258. The department is already guided by best science, and the rules are already guided by best science. Actually, all functions of the department are guided by best science. Does this committee question the professionalism of our department? And if not, what does this bill actually address? This bill does nothing more than allow anti-hunting activists to infiltrate our Fish and Wildlife Department, allowing them the final say on our hunting, fishing, and trapping traditions. This has been their goal since day one. As I've said in testimony previously, I'm not sure why our legislators are continuing to listen to people that have been known to disparage anyone that disagrees with them, including hunters, legislators, and biologists. These activists can't truly believe that ending hunting and trapping will be beneficial for wildlife. Overpopulation, overbreeding, disease, motor vehicle deaths, and human-animal conflicts are just a few of the problems that will be a direct result of changing our hunting and trapping regulations. I just wanted to quickly note, in response to the dog trainer, a false rhetoric regarding very few incidents are being used as a scare tactic to influence those without any true knowledge of dogs or hunting with hounds, to change their opinion on this activity. And hound dogs use scent to track animals, not sight. So it refutes the idea that they won't recognize a fluffy dog as a dog, but instead would recognize that dog as a bear. I've lived in Vermont my entire life. I've always been proud to be a Vermonter, and I've been glad to raise my 2 sons as young men, carrying on family traditions passed down for generations. Vermont state, however, has changed tremendously over the years, and this legislator is responsible. You have created a welcoming environment for animal rights act extremists. We are no longer being represented by Vermonters, but by folks that have moved to Vermont to make radical change, forcing our way of life out. I would like the legislator to support the positions of good, honest Vermonters instead of animal rights activists and terrorists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frank.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Right, so gonna just read off the name, the next person on our list, John Bronner. Mr. Bronner here online, not in the hall.
Not at all.
Okay, so we'll pass over and leave a place for him if he comes back in. Ms. Jameson? Ann Jameson, is she? Oh, there you are. All right.
Close to me. Yes.
There's three more, then we'll take a break. As we take a break, let's talk about what we'll do after. So, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Bray and committee members. I'm Ann Jameson from Marshfield. I'm the Wildlife Advocacy Coordinator for Green Mountain Animal Defenders. Speaking on behalf of our more than 3,000 members and supporters in support of S258. The Vermont Fish and Wildlife Board, composed only of hunters, anglers, trappers, and founders, is currently responsible for the policy rules regarding the management of wildlife held in public trust. Yet it ignores the voice of that very public. Although as a member of that public constituency, I'm invited to make my opinions known to the board at its meetings and other public comment venues. As a wildlife advocate, those views and comments fall on largely ears that refuse to hear. Requests for change for the good of our wild animals or to resolve potential concerns regarding human and wildlife interactions are met with either outright hostility or in some cases, or just simply ignored. I have been attending board meetings, with wildlife board meetings regularly since 2019, including as the BMAD representative to the 10-year big game plan discussions in 2020. Board members almost never acknowledge my presence or my opinion before, during, or after meetings. However, members of the department are much more considerate in that respect. Some of the rules that have been proposed for the board are actually at odds with the sound management of wildlife or consultative use, such as hunting and fishing. The scientific knowledge and educational background of the larger department are often bypassed in order to cater to those consumer groups. That there are also non-consumptive uses such as wildlife watching, photography, or heaven forbid, ecological and habitable habitat balance done by that wildlife, provided by that wildlife, is rarely a focus and not considered important. This was made very evident in the BMD working group sessions in 2022, where wildlife advocate members' ideas and suggestions were totally ignored. And the board's refusal to regard the two final objections made of the LCARs last fall, even though the department did so. Clearly, this board has become accountable to no one but itself. Not only does the board lack diversity of interest in its composition, the members lack the educational background necessary to make science-based ethical wildlife policy decisions. I feel it does not represent the values of most Vermonters towards the stewardship of wildlife, yet has the power to make decisions and rules regarding the wildlife, disregarding the fact that funding for private fish and wildlife work comes from the taxes paid to the public. There is a critical need for change. By making the Fish and Wildlife Board advisory only, mandating that members be appointed by 3 different legislative entities, and requiring that those members receive training specific to wildlife and its management, I believe S258 would address these needs. I will say, I look forward to working with a new Fish and Wildlife Board, which is inclusive, respectful, and cognizant of the values of not only Vermonters, but that wildlife we have in our state. Thank you.
Next up is Mark Green.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Green, here on the screen. Good morning, Mr. Green.
Good morning. My name is,
Your
my name
turn.
is, okay. My name is Mark Green. I'm a resident of Weathersfield, Vermont, in Windsor County. And I would like to say that I am totally against S-258. More for the dismantling of the present board and the way they operate. If you've ever had a chance to attend a board meeting, yes, many of these people aren't biologists, but they get important information and from department biologists. They're allowed to make up their own minds, but anytime I have attended many of these board meetings, they have gone with the department's recommendations. And the department oversees all the wildlife in the state, and any Vermonter knows that wildlife is flourishing now in the state. It anywhere from coyotes. When I was growing up, I used to hunt woodchucks. The first time I ever saw a coyote was tearing apart a farmer's calf, newborn calf in the field. And I couldn't believe what I was watching. This was back in the late 1960s. And but they have thrived even with hunting. There aren't many people that pursue coyotes on a regular basis. There are, I believe there are 36 given out to houndsmen in the state, which relatively is a small number. But I'm surprised it's become such a big issue. But my main point is I feel that the board has done a fantastic job, and with the help of the department, making decisions to control the wildlife. We know that anybody that's been a hunter knows the ultimate goal of anti-hunters. And like the previous gentleman said, that's the biggest fear of changing the board, is that these anti-hunters would get on the board, and it's happened in so many states. That's part of their agenda, to get in to totally end hunting. And I watched some of the testimony the other day, and you said that we can't say what's in people's minds in these anti-hunters, but they have come out and said that their goal is actually to totally end hunting. And it's not to help wildlife, as wildlife does need to be controlled. You know, I mean, we've seen it, like the gentleman said, Vermont had such terrible luck with white-tailed deer back in the late 60s when the legislature was still controlling it. And I think that finally convinced the legislators to go with the department control, and they came up with the Fish and Game Board, and it seems like it's worked so well. You know, an old adage, don't fix it if it isn't broken, but I know you've heard that before in these testimonies. But it just doesn't make sense to go and change this whole board over. Yes, I understand there are some complaints. I feel for people that have been attacked by hounds. Unfortunately, I don't know how to fix that situation. Vermont has a leash law, but they never enforce the leash law. So, you know, it's but definitely there could be some better ways probably to do certain things, but I don't believe this is one of them. So I would like just to say that I'd like you not to let Senate Bill 258 progress out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Green. Next up is David Lasky.
He's moving.
Okay, so again, if anyone knows Mr. Lasky, if you want to invite him to submit written testimony, we'll be happy to receive it. And next up after that, so we've had a couple additions of Rob Borowski.
Yeah. The phone rang.
I know, I just.
I don't know who it was.
Yeah, I got it, I got it. The phone is, I believe.
Good morning, Mr. Borowski.
Thank you, and I have kind of apologized. I know I sent you a letter that I hadn't been put on the list, and so I was just rolled in this morning, and all my notes are at home, so. But I have hours to talk about, and so when you give me about 30 seconds that I've talked enough, just flag me down, and I'll wrap it up.
For about 3 minutes.
I got it, I know that. Basically, I am opposed to this bill, and I think I'm the kind of person you do want to talk to, and Senator McDonough, I don't know if you remember me back from 20 years ago. But anyways, I'll get to that in a moment. But my background is that I did have worked for the Nature Conservancy in Minnesota. I was a research coordinator for scientific and natural areas for the state of Minnesota, with a crews of over 20 to 30 people working under me. I did serve ad hocly on the Minnesota Scientific and Natural Areas Advisory Committees. I wasn't hotshot enough to actually be on the committee, but I came to Vermont. In 1984 established a private chiropractic office. I just retired after 35 years. And I was put on the Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee in the 80s because of my background, scientifically a hunter, joined the Berry Fish and Game Club. I got the record. They made me president now 3 times. That's what happens when you don't show up to a meeting. And so I'm still involved there. And then I got put onto the Fish and Wildlife Board, which I served from year 2000 to 2006, and we had a grand old time. I was appointed by Governor Howard Dean, and then I was made chair by Douglas, which I did for 4 years. I saw the expansion of the board from 7 to 14 members. We came to the legislature to get additional authority on the deer herd. And managing 13 people, I was perfect. I was it was difficult. So I can speak to many aspects of how this kind of works. I'm also involved with an organization called Conservation Leaders for Tomorrow, CLFP.org. You would all benefit by our workshops, but if you got 5 days out of your life with no sleep and a lot of activity, that would be great. But it's a hunter awareness program for professionals working within Fish and Wildlife Service. I just got back from Washington, D.C. two weeks ago, ran a program down there at the NCPC Training Center, Federal Training Center, or as I call it, Washington Part 2. And anyways, so the point on unqualified board members and stuff is kind of a little crazy. We are qualified, and but the board itself, I want to just kind of reiterate. So back about the year 1999. When I was asked to, consider being on the board, it was Angie and Serpy. Some of you may remember him. And he said, Rob, he said, we'd like you to consider being on this. He said, the Fish and Wildlife Board is the greatest thing out there. And he said, why is that, Angie? He said, because you're appointed, to a 6-year term. You don't get another one. You're not running for re-election. That's important. You're given authority by a legislature. That is important. The constraints that the board works in is very small. We had gotten into arguments with some of my board members, and I just say, read the 3 pages that give us authority, and you'll know what to do. They wanted some answers, but it's very important, and part of that is, in fact, that you know how it works. I've been testifying. I testified in this room 20 years ago. I testified to LCAR. Been around the block on all this. It's a process. It works. 2 things that historically, so I don't have all my notes. Boards were first created primarily in the 30s as wildlife management became more advanced as a way to facilitate rulemaking. Again, with side boards, but those initial boards did have a lot of authority. They hired what we would call commissioners in this state. commissioners in other states would actually be board members, commission board, same thing. And had a lot of fiduciary responsibility. That was pretty much stripped through as laws were written. Oh, yeah, we had it all, you know, little people appointed. That was a hot shot deal back then. And then boards then became, you know, more as they are now, regulatory, as we know them, primarily into the sixties, when a lot of that, you know, authority was stripped away. That's all fine, but, you know, basically getting down to the business of those rules. Partly in the statute too, it does say that the information has to come from the biologist of this state. Okay, so two things that when I ran the table, I had my board members, sometimes I would have to talk to them that night. Two things you never say. You never say the word money on the table. We don't regulate money. That's for you guys to do. And the second is you never say my people. And you remember Steve Hill was the attorney. I talked to Steve, you know, probably once or twice a week, plus the commissioner for 4 years. We knew when to get hold of each other, 7 a.m. in the morning, and I had to be at work at 4:45. And, you know, we talked about this and the representation of the people of Vermont. I know that was discussed, truthfully, with a little bit of sarcasm, I can say that because I'm not running for office, you know, by this committee and by some of the people out there in the hall, but that's not the way it works. It worked on my table. They said as a primary background, we do hunt, fish and all that, I don't trap. I can't talk to the trapping component of this, or that I'm not involved. I want to speak to my area of expertise on this. But the board's work, I give a talk with the CLFD program on rules, regulations, and describe how they happened, all these people working, you know, around the country. And you can imagine, I had a chart, little Venn diagrams, remember those little circles? Okay, one, you've got the department, that's your professional entity, which is again, you know, according to statutory law. Two, you've got the board, which is the regulatory component. It is not run free. The board cannot do whatever they want. They get slapped back pretty quick by, ICAR and the interagency, the public hearing stuff. It's a very, once you understand the process, it's not that difficult. People don't understand the process. And the third, of course, is the public. When you get an overlap of all of those entities, it works out pretty good. Examples of this would be, you know, my feelings, of course, when you have ballot referendums, thank God we don't have them in this. It's just like whoever's got the most votes wins. That's not management. The board is constrained. We've got to get the input. I've had people back in my day, well, you know, what about this guy and this way they're doing it in Pennsylvania? I said, great, you got that information. But I said, you got to send that to our biologists, our professionals. They will apply and give the opinion that we're gonna follow, given by the director. My people on the board are not bottom feeders. I don't want to say, well, I talked to this game warden, because the colonel's going to cringe when a board member says it. I talked to this biologist, I want to hear it from the director. They're the ones supplying that information. The system works. Now, this may surprise people, I've dealt with this. I know you're gonna have to throw that tennis ball at me.
I don't have a tennis ball, but we're pretty well over.
Okay, I'll just one point, and then I have two recommendations that are quick, that I'm not gonna elaborate on. One is, I have no problems with, back then, we used the term non-consumptive members on the board. You heard testimony of that two minutes ago. The reason I don't is from that statement I just made. You don't ever say my people. Again, whatever we had 2 times ago. You are not representing the animal rights. You're not representing this. You're representing the people of Vermont. You listen to all sides. And if anybody comes in, I didn't let my people say, well, my people in Bennington County. I said, your people are the people of the state of Vermont. You stand in Bennington. I'm Washington, so that's where you're going to get the information and bring to the table. You're going to be an expert there. My recommendations sound simply, the one hasn't been heard before, 1 acre, 1% general fund reapportionment. You want to talk, I heard this, you guys have been around, you know, this is not new. You guys talk about a changing environment. Just where this is going. The other is, you want to make a non-consumptive, non-licensed holder group, make them advisory to the board. Give them a hat and a badge and give them a place so they are heard, and then all your problems are solved because you know, we listen to those. When I was on the advisory committee, we had Audubon, we had the naturalists. We all worked together and talked, and we had a lot of common ground. I could go on, but I won't. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I apologize about.
Rob Borowski, I'll be in touch.
Okay, sounds good.
Beer.
I'll
I'm beer.
listen to your testimony. Thank you.
I've got more, but
So we only have 2 more people on the list at the moment, so I'm gonna ask the committee if you can hang in. We'll do that, and then we will take a break. We've moved, thank you to everyone who's moved right along. We're a little ahead of schedule. So after the break, I'm gonna ask during the break, anyone who is here and would like to speak, if you could please talk, Jude will compose a list and fit people in for the balance of this morning, reserving a little time for some committee work. Okay, so I can read that name then. Ian McKinsey.
She's up my home. Okay, is that long? Yes. No.
So if they're on the list, I'm reading them. So.
I'm gonna have to step out. She was here earlier. Well, I was told she wasn't here. You want me to add her? Okay. But Lori, they passed the doors, shrink out her doors and come. It appears Anne is not here and would like Lori to speak. If Lori is available.
Matter of fact, Lori, you move? All right, thank you. Please join us. You'll be our last scheduled witness for this morning. As I just said, we'll take a break. During the break, we can schedule more people in because we've actually, people have been very helpful moving right along.
So this is our last person.
Last person before the break. I know we've been sitting almost 2 hours straight.
As quick as I can,
Well,
but I'm not a public speaker, I have a ton of the story. I moved here in 1999 after 2 days after I graduated from veterinary school. And I've been practicing veterinarian since and lived in Hampshire, Vermont.
and I'm sorry, can you, I'm having a little trouble hearing. There's a noisy vent front end.
I moved to Vermont in 1999, 2 days after I graduated from Ohio State Veterinary School. And on Easter Sunday, 2021, I was out mountain biking with my dog in the Fairleigh Town Forest. I was up on Ball Top Mountain, communing with all my dead animals that had been cremated and buried. I was just having a lovely 8:30 in the morning Easter. I heard some hounds baying off in the distance, making quite the racket. Felt bad for the neighbors, these dogs slid past me, they were kind of being kept awake. At some point I lost any onshore contact with the dogs. I had to do a pretty difficult downhill to continue on my loop and skirted around some mud pots and got to Brushwood Road. And I got on my bike to get around the big mud spot when I saw Radio Collar Hound charging towards us. We were about 3 miles from Lake Moray at the time. And my dog doesn't do really well with dogs that get in his face, and I didn't see a owner with the dog, and I was not excited. A few seconds later, I looked to my right and there's 2 other dogs charging our way, and I was like, oh shit, this is not good, we need to get out of here. I quickly got on my bike and I look over to the side, my dog is howling, screeching, 3 dogs have him pinned, he gets up, takes a few leaps, they have him down again. He's gonna be killed. What do? I don't have any weapons. I'm 95 pounds on a good day. The only thing I could do is what I've always done when we've been out biking. I got on my bike and I started to ride and screaming, Spider, come. And he is so committed to stay by my side. He broke the tackle, he caught up. And from that point in time, I saw a 4th dog that had joined the party, and the dogs were running in pairs down either side of the mud road. There was mud, there was ice. We were both filthy, head to toe, soaking wet, 50-degree weather. And we had 3 miles to go. There was no way I was gonna make it. I was running him ahead of me, which was working training. I've always wanted him to stay at my side or behind me. And I'm urging him, just go. And as the dogs would run up behind him, I was swaying into their side, trying to knock them off their face. I felt like I was in a James Bond movie. There was no way he was gonna make it. And I would get too close to him, and how I trained him initially to stay at my side is if he'd go ahead of me, I'd get close behind him, he would stop and obey me. And every now and again, I get too close to him, he'd stop, he'd jump on top of him, I just keep going, screaming for him to come, and he kept breaking the tackles. I was terrified at some point, they were gonna get him down, they'd make separate his Achilles tendon, he was not gonna be able to run. The only thing I could do at that point would be to throw myself on top of him and try to walk with my bike. I was terrified as we kept going. I knew there's this hill that gets very, very low sunlight, and it is ice late into the season. I never would have tried to get down that hill under those circumstances without tiptoeing my way down, which is how I intended to go back before we ran into these dogs. I jumped off my bike, and the only time that the hounds weren't attacking my dog was during that moment in time as the 6 of us were sliding down this hill trying to not break bones. I did not have a helmet on at all. I'm kind of dumb. I go out mountain biking all the time. So this It's a temp fate. And that last mile, that was just a series of hills, and I was going well beyond my comfort zone. I felt like I was on a razor's edge. If I slow down, they're gonna take him down. He's not gonna get back up. He's gonna die in front of me. And if he gets mutilated in front of me, I don't know how I'm gonna handle that. But if I fall, he's gonna stay with me. He's gonna be hit. I went as quick as I could. I've never been that pumped up in my life. And I got down to the end of Lake Maury Road, was flying, got to the first cabin in the Hobart Outdoor Center that I could access easily, dumped my bike, ran up on the porch and tucked in behind me, and the hounds were so dumb, as long as they couldn't see him, they were just circling like sharks, circling like a couple times the hound would get a view of him and see peek his head up from behind me, and it was like shoving the water, and he would get all excited. I'd have to try to rush them off the porch. And we were stuck there for about 15 minutes. I'm screaming my head off, hoping somebody in a neighboring house would hear me, call the police, or drive a truck up so I could load him up and get out of there. It took about 15 minutes before the hunter arrived, and at that point in time, I was waving down the first vehicle to arrive. It happened to be the hunters. Guy jumped out, grabbed the dog, loaded it in the truck. It took him probably about 5 minutes chasing them all over the road to collect them all. So as far as the town's being under control with people trying to give you a break, it took him forever to load those dogs. And when he talked to the Fish and Game Warden after the fact, he was able to relay everything that had happened. He could see those dogs running on the road for miles. If I had been wildlife, if the dog had been wildlife, that wouldn't have been the case. He knew that fish dogs were not after a coyote or a bobcat or deer. But I was screaming and letting him know, probably with a little bit of profanity, that his dogs tried to kill my dog and I'd like some help with the veterinary bills. And he did. I believe he used vulgarity back, although what happened, my head was so spinning, I don't remember exactly what he said, but I could have sworn he said fuck off. He grabbed his last dog and he tore out of there. He didn't want to be identified. He later said that he felt very bad about what happened, but so bad that he couldn't even come and talk to me. And I wasn't going to approach his vehicle until the dogs were loaded, because my dog had already taken enough bites. He didn't get to get good anymore. But the deeper layer to all of this is I moved to Vermont. I'd never been up to Vermont before I came here. All I knew is I needed to leave Ohio because I had lost my mother, and as of 2014, all 3 of my siblings to suicide. The only thing that has kept me alive, that has kept me a functional employee member of society, is getting outdoors in the woods with my dog, blowing off steam with exercise and just sunlight. And because of my need to be out, I nearly got my dog killed. He had been mutilated in front of me, and he was the only family member I have. I live a very isolated life, self-defense. If he had died in front of me that way, I have no doubt how I would have reacted. And I don't think there would be any concerns about trying to ban coyote hunting right now, because it would have already been banned, because I would have taken my life and I would have made damn sure when I did it that my story would have been very well known. And there would have been more tragedy that I would have taken with me when I died. I'm not a crazy person. I love my patients. I love my clients. I would have lost my shit. I would have killed those dogs. I would have made sure the media was well aware of what I was going to do before I did it, and I would not be doing now. And that's my story. And it's just such a brutal. I like to think humans are more involved, but the brutality involved. And now I haven't been scared out of the woods. I now have a canister bear spray and a razor sharp buck knife. And I'm almost wishing for round 2. It's not the hound's fault. What happened? It's the hunters, not the hounds. They've been bred to do one certain sport. But next time, I know my dog, who's gotten older, is out front. If anybody would like to meet him, he's a sweetheart. If we run into him again, I've already had it figured out. I can blast him. I can take out a couple. I know exactly where to cut. Get a couple more close range that are starting to have a little wear off of the spray, and go for the next. The hunter will come by and he'll pick up a pile of dead slashed up dogs. My dog will probably be dead and I'll be bit up, but man, it'll feel good. So that's what it's, and I'm a veterinarian. These are the words came to welfare of animals, and the rage I haven't stopped. I have no doubt I would act. I have no doubt I would act. that's my story. I'm ready for round two.
Sorry, thank you for sorry that happened to you.
How's your dog now?
Um,
He's actually good. It's gonna happen to somebody's kids, can you imagine this? Anybody with kids, grandkids? I chose not to breed, but people out there do have kids and that could be the family dog and I can't imagine being a 12-year-old child and have that. As an early memory.
Right, as a vet, you've treated dogs who've been, hound dogs who've been eviscerated.
No, I have seen the bear dogs.
Sorry,
Kind of,
I don't mean to interrupt, so thank you for your story, for the whole room, it's sorry, I think it's clear, you know, what kind of. Troubles you and your dog had. So then, we're gonna take, break, we'll start at 11:15. Restart at 11:15, if there are folks here who did sign up and get a chance to speak today. Please talk to Jude during the break and we'll put together a list to finish off the morning. Thank you for everyone for coming in and, you know, there's a little sign over there that says be optimistic and it comes down to, for me, I know you're getting a little tired of hearing it, but I hear a lot.
I love it. I'm just that was extremely difficult to hear and process. I am so sorry. That was terrible. But yes, let's be optimistic, please.
The be optimistic thing for me, people will say, well, how could you possibly be optimistic? There's a lot of trouble. And I'd say, well, because when Vermonters have a difference of opinion, we still have the ability to sit politely and have a civil conversation with each other in a room and hear each other and then sort things out. And so I've seen us do that over and over again. And grateful for everyone who's helping us do better work in here today. So we'll take a break till 1/4 past, and if you